You've probably seen it in the headlines, right? A radical conservative movement that seems to be reshaping politics all across the Western world. But behind the rallies and the sound bites, there's a really complex set of ideas, almost like a blueprint for a totally different kind of future. Today, we're going to dig into that blueprint. We're exploring the intellectual origins of the new right.
So, at its very heart, this is a movement that crosses borders. Its whole defining feature is this fierce resistance to what it calls globalization and global governance. It kind of sets itself up as the last line of defense for national traditions against a world that it believes is just completely losing its way.
And this resistance, it's really fueled by a specific set of grievances. It's this blend of ethno-nationalist ideas, opposition to immigration, a sharp critique of global capitalism, and a flat-out rejection of so-called liberal elites. But the real emotional core here, it's this deep, profound sense of cultural loss. This feeling that traditional beliefs are totally under siege. All right, so to make sense of all this, we're going to follow a clear roadmap. We'll start with the movement's modern-day resistance, and then we'll dig into its core strategy, this battle for culture. From there, we'll explore its central theory of power, see how that applies to the world stage, and finally, check out its visions for the future. Let's get started.
Okay, first up, let's just look at the movement as it exists right now. A new kind of conservative resistance. And this isn't just one party in one country. We're talking about a transnational coalition of forces, stretching all the way from Europe to North America, and they're often united more by who they're against than what they're actually for.
But this just begs the question, doesn't it? Are these ideas actually new? Or are we just seeing a modern-day version of a much, much older intellectual tradition? Well, to figure that out, we got to rewind the clock a few decades.
And that brings us right to the movement's strategic core, this idea they call metapolitics. The concept is simple, but it's also pretty profound. If you want to win the political battle tomorrow, you have to win the cultural battle today.
The story really kicks off in France back in the late 1960s. A group called the Nouvelle Droite, or New Right, came together. They were actually really impressed by how the New Left had pulled off its long march through the institutions, and they basically decided to learn from their enemies. Fast forward to the 1980s, and you see a parallel movement of paleo-conservatives brewing in the US, sharing a very similar disdain for the conservative establishment.
And this is the strategy, metapolitics. Now here's the wild part. The idea was actually borrowed from the Marxist thinker Antonio Gramsci. See, he argued that real power isn't just political, it's cultural. So the New Right completely shifted its focus. Instead of just trying to win elections, they began this long-term war over values, over ideas, and over the very boundaries of what you can even say in public.
This whole goal was just perfectly summed up by the American paleoconservative Sam Francis. He called for a counter-hegemony. I mean, not just a new political party, but an entire alternative ecosystem of media, journals, and think tanks, all designed to directly challenge the dominant culture.
Now, this battle for culture, it isn't random. It's all guided by this single, powerful idea that claims to explain how the modern world really works and who's truly holding the power. You could call it their theory of everything.
And it all boils down to this one fundamental question. The New Right argues that it's not politicians or old-money capitalists who are truly in charge. So, who is? Their answer to this question is the absolute key to their entire worldview.
Their answer is the new class. This theory, first really pushed by James Berman, argues that the real rulers of modern society are the managers, the technocrats, the bureaucrats, the experts. Their power isn't based on what they own, but on what they know and what they control, the systems, the data, the organizations.
You know who just nailed the summary of this? George Orwell. In his review of Burnham's work, he put it perfectly. He saw this as a totally new form of society. Not capitalist, not socialist, but managerial. A centralized world run by an aristocracy of talent who effectively control the means of production without ever really owning them.
So the really crucial point here is this fundamental shift. You have the old capitalist class, powered by ownership and classical liberalism, being replaced by a new managerial class, powered by expertise and a cosmopolitan managerial liberalism. And their main goal isn't profit, it's the expansion and maintenance of the very institutions that give them their power.
Okay, so we've got this theory of a new class. How does that actually play out on the world stage? Well, the New Right uses it as a kind of master key to unlock everything, from foreign policy and global organizations to immigration and cultural shifts.
From this perspective, major social changes like immigration aren't seen as something that just happens naturally.
For instance, the narrative known as the Great Replacement argues that mass immigration is actually a deliberate policy engineered by the managerial class. In this view, it serves their interests by creating a more atomized, easily managed population, one that's free from strong traditional or national identities.
So, from the new rights perspective, there's a clear three-step strategy in play. First, you promote universal values to weaken national loyalties. That paves the way for step two. You empower international bodies that shift power away from nation-states. And the final step? You use this new global framework to overrule local democratic decisions, effectively crushing national sovereignty.
So given this really deep critique of the present, what's the alternative? What kind of future does the new right actually want? Well, as we're about to see, the answers are pretty diverse and often radically different from each other.
And what's just fascinating is how varied these visions are. In America, the focus is often on debureaucratization and an America-first foreign policy. Over in Western Europe, some thinkers propose new civilizational great spaces, often including Russia. And then you have Russian neo-Eurasianists who envision this grand alliance to create a multipolar world that stands in direct opposition to liberal modernity.
And some of these ideas get truly radical. I mean, take archaeofuturism. It's a vision that fuses the archaic with the futuristic. It imagines a two-tiered world. You have a small elite commanding hyper-advanced technology, while the rest of society basically returns to traditional, pre-modern ways of life. This quote from Guillaume Fay really captures that radical spirit perfectly. The goal isn't to reform the modern world. It's to completely overcome it. They see the current system as totally doomed, believing a collapse is inevitable and that something brand new has to rise from the ashes.
So what's the key takeaway from all this? Well, the source material suggests that the new right's biggest achievement so far hasn't been winning power directly, but actually succeeding in its metapolitical strategy, shifting the boundaries of public discourse and making once unthinkable ideas part of the mainstream political debate.
And that leaves us with one final and pretty crucial question. In an era some people are calling post-truth, what happens when the battlefield is no longer just about policy, but about the very meaning of our words and ideas? How does any society find common ground to move forward then?